and thank you, colleagues. As Don was saying, the time when you can go out and interact with each other is always the most valuable time at conferences and seminars. Speakers are really just an excuse for the rest of us to get together and network, so please make the most of these opportunities. At good seminars and good conferences and workshops, you actually do get something from the speaker. And I'm delighted to say that I gained a great deal from listening to Ron, and I know we'll get a lot more as we go through the day from the other speakers. My presentation to you today is going to be quite provocative. It's going to be quite unconventional, and it might surprise you, because our experience of change around the world, from a nuclear plant in Pennsylvania to education systems in whole states and whole countries, and indeed the whole state of Tasmania in Australia, and the whole state of Oregon in the United States, showed us over the years that for change to work, it needs to be made up of a particular kind of approach. And so what we're going to be talking about in my session is much more about a non-linear approach as against Ron's linear approach. Now you might say, oops, this is going to be confusing because we've heard Ron's structured linear approach to change, and we've heard some very good questions about metrics and measurement and assessment and so on. And now Brian's telling us that there's something more amorphic, something more organic we need to learn, we need to know about change. And those of you who've been leading change will know that there are not contradictions at all. No matter what process is used, what approach is taken, we need the structure eventually. We need the metrics, we need the processes, we need the tools. The question is, why do most attempts at change fail? And the truth is, as Ron and my other colleagues here will tell you, that most attempts at major change do fail. Very few attempts at major change, and the literature will reinforce this for you, actually achieve their objectives. In much the same way that very few mergers or acquisitions of entities, one entity by another, achieve their intended outcomes. It looks good on paper, but rarely realized in fact. The tragedy is that most organizations go on doing the same thing over and over again, and often with the same consultants. That's a sure sign of madness, or of a very weak board. But there are solutions, and that's what I'm going to share with you today. But I want to do a couple of things first. For the people in the group who raised some very good questions about measurement, and who asked about measuring reliability of metrics, and particularly in Asia, our sponsor today, we're very fortunate in that our sponsor today, and he will speak for the organization later, specializes in this kind of area. How do we improve productivity? How do we get an organization operating optimally in terms of its operations, whether it's education, manufacturing, distribution, whatever it is? How do we get the organization operating optimally through the people themselves, through the organization's own resources, and how do we measure that? And how, more importantly, how do we sustain that? So we're looking forward later to that presentation. Many of your more technical questions and more long-term enabling and sustainability questions will be answered in the overview by today's sponsor. Here's what I want you to do, though. I need you all to have a piece of paper. So if you don't have a piece of paper, I need you to put your hand up, and somebody in the room is going to get a piece of paper to you. But I want you to write down two things. I want you to write down first the thing you know about change. One thing you know for certain about change. Can anything be certain about change? Yes. We know something about change. So what is it you already know about change? Write that down first. I mean, you don't have to do this. This is not compulsory. But it's going to help me and it's going to help us. Secondly, what do you want covered today? What do you definitely want to see covered comprehensively today before you leave? Something you're going to want to learn more about. So it might be metrics, it might be productivity, it might be how do we deal with the top level management, whatever it is. Two things I want from you right now. First, what you know about change. Secondly, what you want to know more about and see covered today. Would you do that for me, please? Take a few minutes. if you don't do it, you won't get the Mars bar. So something you know about change, it's difficult, it's complex, it's whatever, and something you definitely want to see covered. Then what I want you to do, without breaking legs or arms and without twisting your backs, I want you to get together with at least 3 other people and make up a list, a quick list of 2 or 3 under each heading. So a minimum of 3 other people, again, a gentleman with his hand over his mouth and sitting with his arms folded and not writing anything down. You don't have to do this, but all of his body language is saying, I'm not going to do it anyway, but he just might. He just might. Body language.
You want to employ the ultimate change manager?
Hey?
You want to employ the ultimate change
Yes, we're going to bring in, hey, what a technique that is. The ultimate change manager, that big burly beast. What about turning him loose in your organisation? Now, sorry to interrupt you, we don't have the luxury of complete time. So the thing you know about change, the thing you absolutely want to see covered, please consult with 2 or 3 or 4 other people beside you, come up with a list, and please identify the person who's going to tell us what the list is. I'm going to be asking for a hand up from, maybe it's going to be about 10 people. We're not going to get everyone. But then we're going to get the lists passed down the front, and my colleagues here are going to take them, and they're going to make sense of the lists while I'm presenting to you, and they're going to hand me a little piece of paper that says, here's what people think, and here's what they want to see covered. Not necessarily by Brian, but by the whole group and by the panel at the end of the day. Okay, away you go. You're now consulting in groups. We need to see some movement, not too much twisting of facts.
What do you guys
to us if you call. These young ladies are going to collect the lists later, I understand, and they'll be passing them on to the team over here to do some collation while we're working on through up to lunchtime. Ding ding, where's our little bell? I'll just get people to pay attention for a minute. So we'll just get this little group to wrap up in the middle here. They'll know in a minute that we're all waiting. Someone will say, they're all waiting for us. Thank you, sir. Thank you, and well done, because that's the energy around this issue. The first question was, what do we know about change?
Yeah, we have several things. Change is constant.
Constant.
Change comes top down.
Change comes from top down.
Yes. And we have structured and unstructured changes.
Structured and unstructured changes. Thank you.
Yes. That's the first question.
That's the first question. And the second question was, what do we need covered today? Before we leave, we need to see this covered.
I think in general the measurements.
Measurements.
Yeah. The metrics, measurements.
Darren is going to give us a big burst on that. And his company is the kind of company that can do that with you. I'm not plugging his company. I've never met Darren before. But what I now know about it is he's the kind of people we need when we get down to the business end of things.
The second thing is how to sustain the change.
Sustaining the change.
Sustain the change.
Yes, yes. Thank you.
That's it.
Wonderful, and thank you so much, and to your colleagues too. The next volunteer was over here, the young lady. Thank you.
Okay, for our group, what we know about change is number one, people don't like it.
People don't like change.
People don't like change.
Myth number one.
Yeah, but we know that people have to work together to make it done, to make it successful, right? And it's all about communication and include behavior, attitude, system, and process.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
So, second question, what we want to know more from today? Agree with that group, measurement?
Yes.
It's very consensus. The other one is about benefit realization.
Yes.
It's also linked
Yes.
to measurement and also the leadership and ownership
Yes.
of the change program. And the last one is how to merge culture in
Yes.
M&A event.
Yes, excellent, excellent. And one of the case studies we'll touch on if we have time is the recovery of a failed merger in the gas and electricity industry in Houston by a couple of companies who were living in the shadow of Enron at the time. You remember Enron? And these companies, when we were working with them, were so in awe of Enron. Now these companies are now part of a big enterprise called Centerpoint, a big conglomerate in the United States. And Enron, of course, has gone bye-bye. Yes. Thank you so much, young lady, and for your colleagues too. Now, next volunteer, we'll just take one more, and then we'll get the slips picked up and given to our team. One more volunteer. Here we are. Thank you. What do you know about change?
Finally, I got something right.
Thank you.
For the first question, we got a couple of words. The first one, we said change is happening, and it's quite constant, and some said it's quite hard, but it's fun to do it, right? And then it's some kind of continuous process rather than something you do at one point.
Yes.
And obviously you get resistance from any change, right? For the second one, there are a couple topics that we like to learn from you today. The first one, we'd like to know the Asian approach for change, especially for Thai approach and ASEAN approach, because we're going to join AEC within a couple of years, right? And then also the change approach for the family business, specifically, and also the overall change process. And we'd like to know also how you could identify the needs for change, because that's the important thing, right? And and that would be for our group.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, and to your colleagues too. Thank you everyone for participating in that. Now, our student colleagues are going to collect these lists from you, so would you just put your hand up, those of you who were the scribes who are holding the lists, so we can collect them. Thank you, Dean. I see the Dean himself has been scribing here. That's wonderful. Okay, as we do that, and as my colleagues here work on a total picture, I want to remind you that what I'm going to be talking about is a much more holistic approach to change that has worked very successfully in Asia. It is particularly successful in India. You'll be surprised. The utilities in India, private sector organizations in India. It's been successful in most of the ASEAN countries we've worked in over the last decade, as well as in the Middle East. So I'm only going to use four overheads, four PowerPoint slides. And really you'll get all this, I think, afterwards. Then I'm going to share with you 8 points that I want you to write down for yourselves. Won't be on the slides, won't be on the transparencies. If you want to know what they are, they all begin with T. Now, they don't have to begin with T, because what I want to stress today is that our experience over a quarter of a century, if I was a building, there'd be steam cleaning me or perhaps tearing me down. 25 years of working with organizations, our experience is that there is no one-size-fits-all approach to change in an organization. Not changing an organization, because you can't change an organization by definition. An organization can change, does change, is changing, but there are certain truths in that. One is the truth is that people do like change. The myth that people don't like change is a myth. People don't like being changed. They don't like having change forced upon them. People welcome change. They're changing all the time, our fingernails, our skin, our hair, for those of us who still have it. It's changing all the time. We're changing. That's a continuous, natural, organic process for individuals, for whole countries where we live in Brunei, happening all the time in major ways. So here we are. This is what we're going to be covering very, very briefly in terms of input, and then we're going to be doing a lot more of sharing information and asking a lot of questions. First of all, major change can only be achieved by design or by default. There's only two ways. If you think of a switch, a power point, or a light switch, there's no midpoint. It's either switched on or it's switched off. That's true of major change. It's either on or it's off. It's either happening by design, by people taking responsibility for it consciously and measuring it, changing as we go along, or not. There's no midpoint. So we're talking about by design or by default. Barclays in the United Kingdom underwent some significant change over the past 5 or 6 years by default. Now, there may have been some design in it by people. There may have been a design and intention to manipulate the LIBOR rate, something we've never heard of before, but now we all understand what LIBOR is, the lending rate between banks, and it's going to send Barclays down the tube. Barclays will, if not disappear altogether, will undergo significant change of a negative kind because it allowed things to happen by default rather than by design. Enron, others the same. The organizations you know and work in and respect that are thriving, even in these conditions, are managing change, if you can manage it at all, and we'll talk about that in a moment, leading change, influencing change by design. This university is consciously operating by design. It is not letting things happen by default. With all of its challenges as a private university, focused on business in the English language, it's operating by design. And the dean will tell you that. If we said to him, what is the design? What is the intention? He would articulate that for us. And I'm sure we'd find that just about everybody in the university and the International College could articulate it in their own way. Not a vision statement or a mission statement. They're about as useful as the proverbials. But in their own way. They're clear about the purpose of the university and they're clear about the direction on which it has embarked. So, we're talking about major change today and achieving it by design. Here are some of the principles that we need to cover off before I take you through the 8 practices of change that works in Asia and around the world. First of all, and you've covered all this, it's as if you've written these notes for me in the discussions you've represented. Change is continuous. We heard that from the groups before. It's happening by design or default, but it's happening. It's the same in families and whole nations. Change is happening. Some of the challenges for Spain, for Italy, for Greece, where there are major social shifts taking place, the Arab Spring in the Middle East, these were changes that were happening more by default from the point of view of those at the top of the system than by design. By design from those at the bottom end of the system, but by default from those at the top. Where the control needs to lie is an interesting question, and we'll talk about that as we go through. The number one principle of achieving change by design, sustainable change, measurable change, is that it is continuous and it needs to happen by design rather than by default. Change cannot be managed as such or controlled. It cannot be controlled. No matter how many of the tools you apply, how many expensive consultants you engage, change cannot be managed or controlled by definition. Because as Ron said, we're dealing with people. Ron made the very good point that training often comes at the end of the change process or change initiative, and yet it's the most significant thing Ron was saying, getting people enabled, equipped, ready, skilled. It needs to happen from the beginning, not the end. The people side of change, of morphing from one kind of organization to another, transformation, transition, the people side of that process needs to come first, and second and third. The third principle is the challenge, in that second principle, if it cannot be managed or controlled, the question is, well, hang on, where does that leave us? What is our responsibility as chief executives, as boards, as senior management? It needs to be influenced. It needs to be shaped. It needs to be absolutely monitored, measured, and influenced and reshaped along the way. The challenge is, the third principle is, the challenge is to what extent are continuous change outcomes or consequences being achieved by design or by default. So in each of your organizations, not today because it's Saturday, but every day of the week, change is happening in your organization, happening here in the college, in the university. The question for the dean and the assistant dean is, in the college, to what extent are these changes happening by design or default? Now, who is it, do you think, that they would need to go to find that out? Who would they need to go to find out, one, what change is actually happening, and two, whether it's happening as intended by the senior people, the formal leaders, or not? Who would they need to go to? Yes, go on, I can see you've got the answer there. The students, yes, the students and the staff, absolutely. They would go to the students and the staff. They might also go, as Ron was saying, to other stakeholders, but first and foremost, they would go to the people. Now remember that slide that had my photo on it? Go to the people. In our corporate brochure, and for the 25 years of working with organizations, our guiding philosophy has been a quotation from Lao Tzu, a Chinese philosopher from 700 BC. And this is what Lao Tzu said, not the Art of War Man. This is not the Art of War Man. I've never read the Art of War because it's all about war, and I'm all about peace. Significant difference. So we don't get into games, we don't take people down caves and into mountains and so on to build better teams. That's not the way to do it. That's the way to scare them and injure them, often. Lao Tzu said this: go to the people, live with them, learn from them, start with what they know, build with what they have. Now, I've done that with you. I've gone to the people. At the very front end of the session, I came to you first. I don't know you, I might never meet you again. I'm only here for one purpose, to share some knowledge with you. But more importantly, to learn from you, to see if I can build on what you know already. Maybe not, maybe yes. If not, these guys will. The people who speak later, or the panel will, or more importantly and more likely, your colleagues here will, as you network and grow together in the process from here on. But that's Lao Tzu. That's what's worked in Asia for us. Every single organization that has invited us in to be involved with them in a major change process, that's the approach we've taken. It's Asian, it's ASEAN, it's Greater Asia, it's Chinese, it's Indian, it's Tibetan, it's wherever you are choosing to operate. Mongolia, in a gold mine in Mongolia 6 years ago, a joint venture with Clough Engineering in Australia. That approach is what saved the day. So moving back to these principles very quickly, and I don't want to talk too much, we move back to that slide where we talked about the issue is the extent to which what's happening in your organization is happening by design or by default. You need to know. If you're the formal leaders or you're the consultants advising, if you're the PricewaterhouseCoopers and the other people who do marvelous work with organizations around the world, that's what you need to know, and you need to help them find out at the formal end of the system. But the fourth one is one of the provocative points. Existing structures and processes cannot handle business continuity, core business continuity, and major change simultaneously. I mentioned that most major change efforts fail around the world. This is the #1 cause of failure. Not change resistance, not mismatched cultures, the fact that we're asking people to do two things simultaneously that are by definition impossible. We're asking them to maintain core business, as Ron was saying earlier, the way we've done things before, and at the same time to visualize, imagine, and bring to reality major change, a new way of doing things. it cannot be done. Where change has succeeded, and you go into it by analysis, as McKinsey and others have done, you'll find that organizations have adopted, mostly by themselves. People don't need consultants or advisors to make change happen and to ensure that it succeeds. And making it happen, I'm using deliberately, not managing it, but making it happen. They've adopted, usually organically, after a number of attempts have failed, they've adopted a particular set of processes. So if we move to the next principle, major change, shaping, monitoring, reshaping, and morphing to the new enterprise. An enterprise cannot be one thing and then another as night follows day. That simply cannot happen. There needs to be time, there needs to be a process by which the organization as it was, as Ron was talking about, the as is, becomes over time the organization that is intended. Again, it doesn't happen that from July 1 we will be this kind of organization, but it's happening over time. But it is not happening because we're asking the same people to do the core business continuity, essential to the bottom line and to the stability of the enterprise, while we're also asking them to invent a new enterprise and implement it. That isn't going to happen. But what does need to happen is that the shaping, monitoring, reshaping, and morphing to the new enterprise over time needs a fully transparent, now this is the key, fully transparent. We heard about transparency earlier. Parallel structure, not the same structure, parallel structure. Provocative, controversial, I know, radical, and dangerous. Badly managed, this will bring the business undone. It's high risk for high return. So it needs to be done very, very carefully. We'll talk about the way it is done by this organization doing it successfully in a moment or two, and then we'll open up to debate and dialogue. By a parallel structure directly accountable to only one person, not a group, not a committee, not a guiding coalition. Forget Potter, forget all the what was it, Ron? How many millions was it when we go change management into Google? Was it 2.5 million, 25 million? 25 million! No wonder people are making a fortune out of change management. Books, systems, processes, 8 steps, 9 steps, 7 steps. The best 7 steps I ever read and have lived by since I read it was Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. I adopted that as my life set of rules. And there is an 8th one. You know, you can rely on these authors. Stephen Covey, incidentally, is a man of absolute integrity and principle. But he came out with an 8th habit. Do you know what it is? Have you heard of the 8th habit? It's not a trick, incidentally. It's find your voice and help others find theirs. Very important in organizational life and in our own lives. Find your voice and help others find theirs. Know what you need to say, want to say, and say it respectfully, etc. But Stephen Covey, if we're looking for recipes, and if you have not read that book, please make that a priority. But this parallel structure must be accountable to the most senior formal leader. Now that's typically the Chief Executive Officer. It ought to be the Chief Executive Officer. In the International College here at the university, it ought to be the Dean. Now the Dean may choose to delegate it to the Assistant Dean, Deputy Dean, or some other officer, and that may work, but that will require a great deal of finessing for reasons we'll look at later. But the most senior accountable officer, this parallel structure must report directly to her or to him. Secondly, the parallel structure must be peopled, populated, voluntarily. It cannot involve people who are brought in, who are conscripted. This parallel structure it has the responsibility for designing, shaping, and implementing, in conjunction with formal leadership over time, and we'll need to talk about this, over time, implementing the new enterprise. So there's 2 things going on at the same time. Core business is maintained by the core organization. A parallel structure is created transparently. Everybody knows about it. Everybody knows who's in it, knows what its objectives are. People come into it voluntarily. because they've been told, they've been given that invitation. And of course, when they come into it, they're prepared for it. This is where we bring in people like Darren and others, and the guys who are talking with us today, to help with that preparation if we need that help. Otherwise, it's supported by the internal organizational people and so on. These parallel structures operate in sync. This is the structure that's taking care of the design of the what will be measured, how will things be done, what will they look like, the stakeholder consultation. These are the people who are looking at core business and making sure the business operates productively, profitably if it's a profit-making business, but productively. And that productivity is continuing to improve. Learning all the time from the parallel structure. The parallel structure, of course, is learning all the time from this. Provocative, radical, high risk, very high return, sustainable. Not once, happens often. Becomes almost routine. Whenever any major change is happening, we're going to go the ERP route. How many people have experienced ERP in the room? Enterprise Resource Planning. And you're still here. But we're going to go the ERP route. Or we're going to go into new markets. We're going to change product lines. We need to do this, we need to do that. If it's major change, these kind of parallel structures will be set up for that major change process. Maybe once, maybe twice, maybe 10 times. How many parallel structures can operate at the same time? Question to be asked, question to be answered. So, it must be voluntary. It must be strategic. It must be linked, as Ron said before, totally aligned to what is absolutely understood throughout the enterprise as the purpose and direction of the organization. My advice is to forget vision statements and mission statements. Don't even worry about values. You see organizations with values that include honesty. For goodness sake, honesty ought to be a given. It shouldn't need to be a value, that should be a given. No, we know it's not. Thank you, Bob Diamond. Fronts up to the Parliament the other day and proceeds to speak, the parliamentarians believe, dishonestly. We won't know for a while. But the same thing's happening with the Leveson inquiry in respect of phone tapping. Witness after witness from enterprises, from police forces and so on, whose values include honesty and integrity. So don't worry about values. As Ron mentioned earlier, and people mentioned here in the list, behaviors are what matter. Values will come in time. But values are different from each part of the organization. What's important is that no one is ambiguous. No one is unclear as to the purpose of this organization and the direction. The purpose is simple. Who are we? What are we doing? Why are we doing it? Who are we doing it for? That's it. Who are we? PricewaterhouseCoopers. Who are we? What do we do? Why do we do it? And who are we doing it for? Everybody knows in PwC. They won't tell you the same language. A new graduate coming in will articulate it quite differently to a senior partner in Boston. But the message will be the same, the essence will be the same. No one will be short of understanding. And the same must be true of the international knowledge for every student, because every student is an advocate. Every student is promoting the college or they're not. The switch is only on or off. No middle, no halfway. And fully represented. The parallel structure must fully and totally represent the organization. Next, the morphing of the new enterprise, once it's clear, articulated, defined, all this communication going on along the journey, is the shared responsibility of the parallel structure and the formal organizational leadership. Now remember, the formal organizational leadership has been running the formal organization all this time. Some of them may be in the parallel structure. So they've gone from there into here, which means they've been replaced in here. They're in here. Not often, I might add. In our experience, not many of the existing formal leadership team qualify for the parallel structure. Why would that be? Not yet. They don't qualify yet for the parallel structure because, why? They know the organization the way it is and always has been. We tried this before. Didn't work then. They're not the people to lead the design, the transformation. They may become that over time as the flow between core business and parallel structure improves and increases all the time. They may become it and people jump over. Some go back to core business. This is just too much for them. So that's what needs to be very, very carefully managed. Managed by the chief executive, managed in the sense of watching, observing, measuring. But the responsibility finally for morphing to the new enterprise, thinking of a major water utility in India, where this was a big struggle for a long, long time, that needed to be the shared responsibility. So what happens eventually is that the parallel structure leadership, because they typically work in what you can call them anything, streams, maybe product, maybe marketing, maybe whatever the stream is, might be curriculum or assessment in the college. As they move almost to the point of implementation, and they're sharing all of this information continuously with the core business leadership, that responsibility needs to amalgamate. Now, often what happens at this point is that formal leaders disappear. Some of them run. In most organizations we've worked with where this process has been adopted, there are always casualties at the formal leadership level in the core business structure, for reasons you will understand. They're embedded. They need to find another organization to go screw up. So they're not going to be part of the new enterprise. They've been screwing it up for years. They haven't been listening to people. People have been treating people with disrespect. We were talking earlier, there have been the mushroom managers, or worse, the seagull managers. The people who, you know them, you've experienced them. Every organization we've been engaged in and will be engaged with have had these kind of managers, and they're occupying key positions and keeping new people from getting up there and taking over. So they fall away. But guess what's happened? Through the parallel structure and through the changes that have happened in the core business structure, many new people have come to the surface. Many new people have risen to the top. People from the front line have taken leadership responsibility. People have absolutely surprised themselves and the organization. And many of them leave too, because they see new opportunities. Suddenly they're able to do things they could never believe they could do. So they're off as well. So there's big risk, you see, big risk that needs to be observed and taken care of. But big payoff. Okay, later we're going to talk about, if we have time, and Don will give me a bell or two, if we want to, we'll talk about some case studies. The merger that had failed in the United States, in Houston, a large automotive retailer in Australia that wanted to grow from being a single state enterprise to national and international, is now listed on the stock exchange, now a public company, very successful. 5 minutes? 5? And 10 minutes for questions. Okay, so we're going to go through the T's very, very quickly. And if we like, we can talk about education system transformation in Brunei or in Australia or in America or any other place, any number of other places. Okay, so these were the principles I wanted to share with you. I think, Ron, people will get all of these overheads later, all of these PowerPoints, so you'll have these principles. But here are the T's that I would, if you want to write them down, do. Otherwise, just remember them, and we can perhaps fit them onto a piece of paper for you later. The first one is total clarity of purpose and direction at every level of the enterprise. So these are the best practices, if you like, that need to be in place for major change to happen and to be sustained, to be measurable, to be accountable, to be delivered. Total clarity of purpose and direction in language that is appropriate to each level of the organization. Secondly, they're all T's. They could just easily be P's or A's. You can think of words that go with these words. Make your own model. There is no one model. Those of you who are doing the business classes here at the university will learn about models. But I was saying to Tony, where's Tony, the student I was talking with earlier? Is he still here or is he shot through? Maybe he thought he'd learned everything in the 2 minutes we talked about. Tony. Pity. He's working outside. I was relying on him. I was going to say, Tony, stand up and tell him the pearls of wisdom I shared with you in morning tea time. No, I wouldn't embarrass him like that. But I was saying to him, leading organizations in education aren't running syllabuses and curriculum and assessment the way they did before. Even in primary and pre-primary and upper primary and secondary school. They're more and more, Tony, I was just telling people that we were talking outside and I was asking about what you were studying. And I was saying to Tony, the way we need to learn these days, and I know the college is committed to this, is that we need to go to the people. So if Dom is the lecturer and his unit is international business or international strategy, what he's going to want to do is to share with the students at the front end of the course, this is what I need you to know at the end of the semester, and this is what I need you to be able to do. So these are the learning intentions, and this is the success criteria, the rubric by which you will be able to determine yourself, not waiting on us to give you a mark on a test. You will know whether you're an A or B, a C, a D, or an E, because in each of these domains, you will know that these characteristics are more true of you than these characteristics. And in the next domain, these. So in this domain, you might be an A, but in this domain, you can see that you're a C. But you can also see what it is you need to do. You need to learn, you need to articulate and understand to get from C to an A. You with me here? So this is what's happening in primary schools. This is what's happening in Brunei education. Moving from rote learning, chalk and talk, one-way traffic, to children becoming co-responsible for their learning. Learning to use Google, learning to use Wikipedia, learning to research. So Tony's just as able as Dom is to go and find out what the content of the syllabus needs to be. And he can come back to Dom, who is receptive to this. Dom has his syllabus written, but the students are now saying to Dom, if we were going to be truly effective in international business or in strategy implementation, we think we need to cover this. We need to be able to do these things at the end of the 4 years. So Dom's going to say, great, it's almost all covered in the syllabus. However, you've introduced 2 or 3 other themes that we will research and we'll pick up. In fact, we'll get you to research them and we'll introduce them to the curriculum. That's how education is going, and that's why it can be so much more online and so on. So we're talking about total clarity of purpose and direction. The second is trust. It's been mentioned before. Trust. How do you get it? It's so hard. But it's not hard to lose it. Just ask Bob Diamond, or the guys in jail from Enron, or from WorldCom. Trust. And not just trust between leadership and the people. Trust at every level, up, down, across, and sideways. The next is transparency. We heard it from the group earlier. Transparency. Some things we can't be transparent about, they're commercial, confidence, and so on, but just about everything we can be transparent about. Secondly is transmission. Fourthly is transmission. Transmission of intention. Transmission of messages. Ron covered this very strongly in his processes and the tools that he talked about to use to get this transmission. Transmission up, down, across, sideways. And not one-way traffic, every which way. We did it earlier. I transmitted an idea to you. You have transmitted information to the team over here. They will shortly transmit it to me while we get into discussion and questions. We'll be able to share that information. Transmission. Transmission of knowledge across the enterprise. Capture and transmission. Transmission, key. Call it communication, call it what you will. But there needs to be transmission continuously. Secondly, territory. Territory. Every one of us in this room, every one of our employees, every person in a 440,000 enterprise across the world has their own territory. They have their own space. When that space is being invaded, that's why they resist change. Because it's going to affect their relationships, their understanding of their job, their knowledge. It scares them. Once we respect their territory and understand it by going to the people, living with them, working with them, learning from them, finding out what they know continuously, we can engage with them on their territory, on their terms. Territory, very, very important. And going back to forgetting the mission and the vision and the corporate videos and so on, please remember the map is not the territory. Having a strategic plan, a business plan, an operational plan, a culture change plan, an X plan, a finance plan, a Y plan, a Z plan, forget it. You need them, but they're not the territory. The territory is where each of us live. And we've got to understand that as organizational leaders and work with that territory. Combine the territory, open it up, share it, become a single territory if we can. But remember that in most organizations, there's going to always be territories that are different. The next is test, test, test. test everything. We test products. We don't test ideas. We don't test what it is we want to achieve through our people. We must test, we must measure, we must assess. I'm going to fly through these. Totality. Total commitment to optimization. Total commitment to excellence and achievement. The next one, the XYZ way. PricewaterhouseCoopers, I'm only using your organization because I know it. But my son works with, it's a very good organization, you can't do much better, except if you maybe think about also Deloitte. My son works with Deloitte. These organizations and small manufacturers, small Kedai in Brunei, wherever you are, there is an XYZ way, the PricewaterhouseCoopers way, the Deloitte way, the International College way. What is that? What is that? What is that? What is that? Oh, it's the way we do things. This is what culture is. It's the way we do things. It's who we are. It's what we're doing. Why we're doing it. Who we're doing it for. So the definition of that way needs to be defined not by top management or consultants, perish the thought, by the people. They're the ones doing it, living it, breathing it, or not, as the case might be. Okay. Was that 8? 8. That's done it. That's it. That's all I have. Except the list. Gentlemen, the winner is, you're going to reach out to us, Ron, so we need a microphone for Ron. Where's one of our colleagues with a microphone? Here's this young man here. Thank you. Now, we very quickly, Ron, have we got a few minutes to do this? We've got 5 minutes, even for the questions.
What do you want?
Very quickly, please, Ron, what's the Reader's Digest version of what we heard from the group in relation to what we know about change?
What I've done is I've just taken all of these bits of paper very quickly and just jotted down what change is. If I just go through them very quickly.
No, it's not what change is, it's what we know about change.
Oh, what we know, sorry, yes, okay. What we know about change. Hard to implement, it's uncontrolled, it's constant, it's scary, it's not liked, it's uncertain, it's resisting, it's inevitable.
Cool. There's a theme, there's a consistency there.
Yeah.
And what we want,
Its consistency is difficult.
and what we want to...
Right, what we want to get, well, there's three different elements. There's soft, hard, and other.
Thank you.
Okay? Some of the soft issues is how to get senior managers to be transparent, how to get people to accept change, how to get people to adapt to change, how to manage change success, how to manage change resistance, encourage change agents, change leaders, deal with stakeholder groups, and how to sustain change through leadership. Soft issues. Hard issues, how do we set up measurement standards? How do we measure success? How do we assess benefits realization? How do we set key performance indicators? And what methods and tools do we use? And a couple of others. Some examples of success and failure. Prediction of change as a result of ASEAN and the opening up of Burma, and how is change handled in Asia?
Okay. Good. Well, we'll cover all of that during afternoon tea. Now look, I think we're breaking for lunch, but this is the man you're going to be here. We're breaking for lunch. Not quite. Is George next? No, it's Darren next. Okay, not even better than George, but even better in relation to an immediate response to this. Darren will cover some of this for us. Darren, as in Australian rules football, handball to you. And also George will and Terry will cover some of these issues later. We're not going to look at these case studies we talked about. That's not a loss, incidentally. Quick questions. We've got young people here with microphones. Not even questions, observations, criticisms, feedback. Let me just go back to the... oops, no, we need to go back to mine now, please. It's very high. Okay, please.
This is a question about strapline, I guess, towards the people. In Japan, they have a very successful way of, they call it Gemba management, where essentially managers go to the people, they see what's happening on the factory floor, and that's where they learn and implement change in the culture for continuous improvement. That doesn't work very well in the rest of Asia. Some of the reasons I've seen is managers or leaders don't want to go down to the floor. They see themselves as separate from the people who are executing or doing things in the organization. And looking at it from the other side, workers who are on the factory floor, when they know a manager or a senior leader is coming, they dress things up for them to make it seem better. How do you address this in sort of, I know it's not large-scale change, it's more of a continuous, sustainable change. How do you address this and sort of get go to the people?
Yep. In fact, the Go to the People has been designed for Asia. And the reason for that is that, as Ron mentioned from his research, in Asia there is a great attention paid to hierarchy. In Brunei, for example, if we were a group of people in the Ministry of Education where we're working currently, no one, if we were just all teachers or department officers working with us, it would be fine. We'd have conversation. It wouldn't be easy. The Malay culture is such that people don't want to be seen to be stepping out too far or showing themselves off and so on. Very, very humble and very, very self-effacing. And loss of face, as it is in other cultures in Asia, is a big issue. Very respectful, very, very quiet, humble. However, if a senior person came in, it would immediately clamp up. Nothing would be said. And great respect would be shown to this assistant director or director and so on. Not the sultan or the minister or a very senior person, just about anybody ahead of them in the system. That's why the parallel structure process was developed. The parallel structure process, the parallel structure is people by individuals from the organization who are willing and able to fulfill that role. That's why it rarely involves many of the current formal leaders, because they cannot see themselves in that situation, going to the shop floor, opening up for equal parity dialogue. So it requires people who, and there are many of them. One of the most limiting things we can be saddled with is the beliefs we're holding on to right now. Consultants are notorious for this. They will tell you change and and people in organizations too, will tell us all the things we just heard here. Change is difficult, change is hard, people resist. Most of that is not true. It's the way you choose to guide and steer yourself and your organization through the process. If there are people in your organization in this room, some of them would be students, would be even better at it than me or some of the other more senior people age-wise in this room. They'd be better at it. So they have to do it. They have to be given that opportunity. We have to let go of the notion that because it doesn't work in Japan, it won't work here. Incidentally, the Japanese system won't work in most other countries. Japan has a particular culture, a particular ethic, a particular dynamic. It won't work. The Japanese approach won't work in Thailand, certainly, and it won't work in most other Asian countries. If we're thinking of ASEAN, the 10 countries in ASEAN, there is a little more similarity. But please believe me, I'm here talking to you about a quarter of a century of actual experience. It works, but it won't work if you drive the formal organization as it exists now to take on major change in a dual role. You're asking people to do the impossible, and that's why it fails. That's why what we believe is resistance is experienced more often than not. It's not resistance, it's bad management. It's lazy thinking. That we can get an organization to do two things simultaneously. It cannot work in a sustainable way. Is that categoric enough for you? Or am I being a bit ambiguous? It won't work. So, and you have to find the people who are willing to go to the workforce and sit with them. It's often the workforce themselves. That's why we say go to the people. You tell us. So what you're saying to people, what the chief executive is saying is, this is what we want to do. And here's how we're planning to do it. Those of you interested in being part of a group that is going to take this on, please talk with Dom. Send a message to Dom. Now, Dom will need to be a person, the Dom will need to be a person to whom they are willing to relate to. Often that's best to be a consultant, because it's outside the organisation. There's no fear. They can give it to the consultant can come back and say, this is the group, because they then go and meet the people and interview them and make a decision, make an assessment. This is where Darren's enterprise and Terry's and Ron's and George's can help. But don't keep doing the same thing expecting different results.
Cheers.
Thank you very much, Brian. That was quite controversial and may go against the grain of many of the things that we've come to understand. Certainly worth further consideration. Now, I know that we haven't had much opportunity for questions, so what I'd like to suggest is that later on in the afternoon we'll have a panel discussion, and if you do have any questions that pertain to Brian's presentation, then please do keep them for then, if you would like them to be collectively addressed. Alternatively, maybe you'd like to speak to him over the lunch, which will be after the next presentation. Now, I'd like to say thank you very much. That was very engaging, Brian. And I'd like to say thank you once more time with a round of applause.